one and yes on the rest of them. The other two that are probably more notable, one more notable than the other. Amendment 3 is about whether or not we're going to officially abolish slavery and remove it.
How and why is that on this election?
Yeah,
how did that come up?
Well, part of the reason I think these things linger is because it's hard to keep our people actively engaged and informed on some of the particulars. And if there's a theme that I think is emerging in our conversation today, it's about how much details and technical expertise matters. Higher learning, if you will. Folks need to know some of this stuff, and it's difficult for some of us to get a grasp on it. It's not always easy to comprehend. It's not always readily accessible, especially with people who do things in their everyday lives like work and raise kids and, so on and so forth. But, these are things that kind of sort of fly under the radar because they haven't really been enforced.
Okay.
And so you think everything is good, and it's based upon how people who are in judicial offices interpret this constitutional language. So if you got people who are favorable in terms of their interpretation, this is what's been happening at the Supreme Court level, right? Roe v. Wade, affirmative action. What happened in times past was you had enough Supreme Court justices that interpreted those things in a way that's favorable for black folk. You don't have that anymore.
No.
Because when you sat out in 2016, or when you said stuff like Hillary and Trump are two sides of the same coin, or my vote don't matter, and Trump got in,
he got his people in.
He was able to appoint people to the Supreme Court that interpret that stuff differently. It's not much different in Tennessee. It's the state constitution, the same way it would be Supreme Court at the federal level. There's a Supreme Court in Tennessee. And if you got a bunch of judges who end up in office that interpret these same things less favorably, if it's still on the Constitution, then you might be in trouble. But since people have been favorably interpreting these things and not trying to explicitly enslave us again, it's like, hey, let's hurry up and get this off.
How does it read on the ballot?
I don't want to misquote it, but it's basically like, hey, let's officially remove enslavement from the Constitution, the possibility of anybody being enslaved, right? Let's make sure that it's clear that the state does not endorse enslavement, and I would say does not endorse enslavement insofar as chattel slavery was concerned prior to the Civil War. And the reason I make that, I'm telling you, these technical terms matter. If you don't make that technical turn, then you would have to explain how Tennessee has the state has a